Okay, morning everyone. I think today it's just you and me, Erica. Nonetheless, that's okay. So obviously, same as the last webinar, you've been muted, your microphone's been muted. But if you want to kind of ask any questions or have, let me know what's going on or something like that, have a chat. You can chat through the questions or the chat function in your panel. So you've already said good morning. Can you just let me know that you can hear me okay? Awesome. All right. So welcome. This is part 3 of the drop-in training, drop-in champions training. And today we're going to talk a little bit about engagement, which is, I think, probably one of the more pressing questions on everyone's lips. We have this amazing tool and we really, people are very excited to use it, but how can I really get my network more engaged with using it to its full capacity? So today is very much theory based, giving you some kind of concepts and ideas of things that you can implement. Really want to share some good case practices as well. So it's a little bit more theory and less on the practical side of using drop-in. And I think these principles are, not only relevant to drop-in, but kind of engaging and motivating networks in general as well. So hopefully there'll be some interesting or useful tips for you here. All right, as always, if there's any questions, just ask at any point and I will stop and address them because these webinars are for you guys as champions. All right, so kind of the key objectives for today, really want to make sure that we're understanding the principles of engaging users in an online community. This is a very new format of communication, relatively, when you look at, all the different mediums that are currently out there. And I guess people are still, and this is not unique to this sector, but this is across all different industries. They're still getting used to this style of communicating and interacting. It's a little different, so there's a few key principles that we can keep in mind. And then I guess secondly, understanding the tangible tools that we have available. So, putting it to a practical level, what actually do we have available to help with this user engagement? Now, if we can achieve these two things today, I think we would have done well. In terms of the agenda, we're going to look at, first of all, principles for engaging networks online. So I've got a series of kind of, scenarios for you. Then we're going to look at some good case practices. So I probably won't go into too much detail about them, but definitely show you where they are, and it hopefully will make sense after we've looked at some of the principles, and then finish with some final tips. Okay. So when we look at the principles of engagement, I guess it really comes down to 5 main things that I like to think about. The first one, which is incredibly important, is making sure that it's very clear that what the tangible benefits for collaborating online are. If people can't see the value in something, they're really not going to engage. It doesn't matter how idealistic or it doesn't matter how nice it may sound and how excited people get about something being new and shiny. If it's not, if it doesn't have a direct return for what they're doing and a real tangible benefit for their daily routine, they're probably not going to engage. So that's, I think, really, really important. It's almost like showing why it's valuable, but I would even go a step further to say why it's necessary. I think at the end of the day, when we're looking at the sector at the moment, everyone can see that we need to collaborate more. But everyone's very aware that we don't have much time. And I think we need to really connect these ideas and say, well, a way of us saving time and being more effective in collaborating is by using these kinds of mediums and giving them some practical, tangible things that they can actually do that will save them time. If we can, tap into this, it will be inherently more motivating for people to, come online and use these tools. So it's a lot about that kind of, basic understanding and communication of what drop-in can really do for different individuals and community groups. I think that kind of leads into the second point, which is I've already mentioned, is really around clarity. So it's all well and good that, the system might be there and there may be some really well tangible benefits and it may be very obvious to us, but is it clear to the network group, your network users or your network group, what those things actually are, and more importantly, how they specifically should be using the system? I can't tell you how often I get the calls, and I think I've mentioned this in previous training sessions of people calling me up and saying, is this what I should be using the system for? And they're the really proactive ones that are kind of calling me up to actually ask that. Most people will go, well, I'm not really sure what I should go in there and do, what specific action I should take on that system. I know it's going to be useful and I know it's going to be interesting for us, but what do I actually do on it? If that's not clear, it's a huge barrier. So making it clear to people will really help them to engage more. The third one, now this is an interesting one that I find I really like to kind of talk about, is this positive reinforcement feedback loops. So when we start looking at motivational science and what really inherently motivates people, not necessarily on a system, but in general, it's really being able to have access to, I guess, a quick feedback loop which tells people whether or not they're doing the right thing or not. The sooner we know if we're on the right track, the sooner we're able to then make a judgment of our next course of action. And it kind of speeds up that process. And especially if we're getting a positive reinforcement, it's inherently motivating. So what we want to do is try and create an experience on the drop-in space for your network group that makes them feel like they've really contributed, that they can see the value they've added, and it gives them a sense of, a quick feedback loop to say, yes, what you're doing on this system is correct and you've added valuable content. Now, for a system like Drop-In, we've actually got quite a lot of tools that can help us with that, because anything that someone does can be visibly seen on Drop-In. And when we see lots of different contributions from lots of different people, it's really going to send those positive reinforcement feedback loops. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. The fourth one is reducing barriers. So I think this one's a pretty key one, and it's a very easy one for us to address, because now that Drop-In's been up and running for about 2.5 years now, we've got a pretty clear sense on what those barriers are. So we can have a look at what they are and maybe things that we could do to mitigate that. And the final one is just making sure that things are relevant. All right. So I think it's kind of this particular point, it really connects with the first one. But if you've got all these amazing features that you can do that could be quite tangible and practical for people, if they're not relevant to what the users are trying to do now, it's probably unlikely that they're going to engage. All right. So that's another key point to keep in mind. I want to look at these 5 points in a little bit more detail then. All right. So if we start, with the idea of tangibility, one thing that you can kind of do, and I've kind of structured this session in kind of questions that you can ask yourselves about your own space and take away, and maybe then write some actions of things that you can do to maybe improve your space for your network group. Okay. So the first one is, how does Drop-In tangibly help us achieve our objective? So this really comes back to, going back to your original terms of reference, why the network group was trying to got together in the first place. And if you can understand what the tangible benefits of what Drop-In can help you with now, it can really help guide the design of your space. So you might think long term you might like to do quite a lot of amazing things, but what can you do right now? If one of the things in your network groups is trying to set dates for meetings, if that's something that's really, really important and you struggle with that, focus on that first and maybe start with, getting people engaged with updating the calendar, all right? And then once you kind of, get from, setting the dates, you might want to go to something else. So maybe then if your network group is just starting, for example, maybe you want to do some voting on some of the important decisions for what the network group might actually do. All right. If the network group's trying to plan ideas for what it might want to do, in the next coming months or something like that, you can also use the voting polls for that kind of thing, or capture the ideas using the ideation macro. All right. If it's just important that you start to get a bit of a library of resources, make that the focus. All right. And if those are, whatever the thing that you need to do now, make that the front and center thing that you're trying to, engage people with. If you start putting too many things on there and having too many features and functionalities, sometimes it can just confuse people. And when they see that those particular features and functionalities aren't being used, they're also not going to be necessarily motivated to start using them. They're going to get the impression that no one comes on here, no one does anything. Why do I want to waste my time? All right. But if you just want to start with something simple like the calendar, and they go there and go, boom, calendar is the first thing they see, and they can see that everyone's adding their dates, they're going to, start to go, wow, okay, cool, I can quickly do that. That's a quick, easy thing for me to do, and I can see some immediate value. All right. Does that kind of make sense for the first point about how how drop-in can be tangible for your group? Awesome. Okay, so moving on to the next point then is around this idea of clarity. So you might pick one or two things to have in your space. Maybe you're going to start with just calendar and that's all. The next thing you need to ask yourself, is it clear then what the individuals can do to engage with the network space? All right. So if you have the calendar there right in the center, have you gone there and actually communicated to the group, hey, this is what you can do with the calendar. All right. In terms of the first point, uncertainty is the biggest killer of engagement. All right. You can have the most amazing, beautiful setup, but if people are unclear as to what they want to, or what they need to do with it, then they're unlikely to engage. All right. And this is not specific to a drop-in as a system. This is, I think, universal in all projects. If people are unclear, people are going to be less engaged with what they're actually doing. All right. The second point is tangible actions which demonstrate engagement online need to be clearly communicated and straightforward. So maybe at your next network group meeting, you could, explain one specific tangible action that people can take to start using the system and clearly communicate how they might do that. So if it's something like adding an event, whilst we might think it's relatively intuitive for people to go there and add the event, maybe some people in your network group aren't so technologically savvy and they just need someone to put it up on the screen and show them. All right. And once they've been shown, they'll go, yes, that's easy enough. And when they get home, they'll be ready to, do that one straightforward activity. And it might sound a little bit over the top that we have to hold people's hands like this, but when we think about how foreign this is as a concept for communication, we can really start to get more of an appreciation for where people are at, and that maybe what's intuitive for us isn't necessarily intuitive for them. So let's be clear and then give them, no reason to say that they didn't know what to do because you've made it clear for them. And I guess this is the same point. Clear tickable actions for users to complete online will increase the chance they will log on and engage. All right. If they have to think about what they need to do before they do it, they're going to find lots of different excuses not to do something. Okay. The general rule, and we spoke about this at the last session, was for navigation design is three clicks to success. So the simpler it is, the easier it is for people to be able to do one specific thing, the more likely you will have success. Okay, so it's pretty much straightforward. Following on from the last point. Again, if there are any questions, let me know, but I will probably just move on. All right. So in this particular point, what I'd like to do is with those first 2 points, look at an example of how you could apply them. All right. So let's take maybe a desired behavior that we'd like the network group to engage with. So let's say that you think polls would be a really, really great thing for your network group to use because there's lots of different things that at different points people need to vote on. So you'd like them to start creating their own polls, all right? So to do that, probably there's a few things we need to think about. First point is it obvious where people need to go to create a poll for voting on a topic, all right? If it's not, then probably people aren't going to engage. So how do we make it obvious? Maybe it could be making that on your homepage, and so maybe if polls weren't on your homepage in the beginning, maybe you might want to think about moving it to your homepage. So if that's a particular desired behavior that you'd like to see, so you move it to your front page, so it becomes very obvious where people need to go to vote on a particular poll or a topic. And if you then want people to be adding their own poll, you need to also make it clear where they can put their poll. One thing that I think is not overly obvious when you go into a drop-in space, if you're not clear on the hierarchy of how pages are structured and how the space is structured, you might not necessarily know exactly where you should put a poll. So it could be something simple as making a space on the homepage where people can put all sorts of polls, or even just making a page where people can put all the different polls and then having a button to that particular page on the homepage. It says clearly polls, right? Make it really obvious and clear. Set up the page so that then people can then just add the poll and they don't have to worry about where it goes. The second thing would be around clarity. Do users know what topics are suitable for a poll? So, some people might think, oh, well, I'd kind of like to get people's opinion on this, but I don't know if that's a suitable topic to be putting on there. Oh, well, I think I'll just leave it. Give people examples of things. Really make it clear to them. If you've heard people in a network group meeting talk about, hey, ask the question to the group about, what names they prefer for a network group or what ideas they have for a particular event, maybe you could then demonstrate how they could actually do that through a poll and actually put a poll up of that topic. And then people can go, oh, wow, I asked that question in the network group, but only half the people of the actual network group were at the meeting. If I put it up on drop-in, then maybe I could get the rest of the group to also add their opinion. I could collect more information. Okay. And then the third one would be, are there instructions? So that's, I think, a kind of an important one. Maybe you've explained how to do a poll before, and we do know that there are actually instructions on drop-in about how to do that. But if the instructions are not maybe easily accessible, that might be just another reason why people won't do it. So I always like to maybe, put a link to the instructions on the page of the polls and say, create a poll, learn how to see the step-by-step guide here, and then add a big link with a nice big button. That way people can go, oh, cool, yes, I have a topic now. I know where I need to put it. There's the instructions. If I get stuck, I'm ready to go. Okay? Does that make sense as an example? Awesome. I think I just have one more example, but let's see how we're going for time. I may skip the next example just because we're running a little bit short on time. All right, but I'll have these slides up before later on as well, so you can have a look at them. Okay, this is about creating forums, the same concepts though. We'll go to the next point, which is looking at barriers. So, sorry, the next one we're looking at positive feedback loops. So one of my favorite ones to talk about. We need to just keep in mind when we're thinking about positive feedback loops and how we can create them, that collaboration doesn't just happen, okay? Especially in, a very foreign communication medium such as a computer, all right? Even when you go to network group meetings or networking events, conferences, people don't always mingle in the way you want. You need to do certain things. You need to create a good environment for people to be able to do that. So there's no difference when we're looking at things online, all right? Just maybe the principles of how you create that positive environment for collaboration are slightly different, okay? So one thing that I always go back to when looking at positive feedback loops is the motivational science behind it. So motivational science tells us that purpose-driven, feedback-rich, and learning-intense experiences drive motivation. And this is a theory called game theory. If you look it up, you might find some really interesting resources around motivation in teams in general, but it's definitely applicable to this online environment, all right? If we can create some sort of environment where there's a clear purpose, where the people can get feedback very quickly about what they're doing and, if they're in the right direction and they have an opportunity to really learn, people will inherently be more motivated to do that particular activity. And this is, I guess, why video games have been so successful, all right? When people are asked about video games and to what they owe their success, it really comes down to the fact that they have this perfect balance of purpose-driven, feedback-rich, learning-intense experiences. And I would recommend any reading on this particular point as well. Some people just think that, games are very successful and motivating because they're fun, which is definitely, I guess, in many cases true. But a lot of people think it's because people win all the time. And because you win all the time in games, then you are more motivated. In actual fact, that's actually really incorrect and misinformed, because the statistics show that people who play games are actually spend 80% of their time failing. All right. Why is that so important to this context of what we're learning about drop-in? If people who are playing games and they're paying money often these days to play games, and they're spending hours playing games online and on computers, and they are failing 80% of the time, then that shows us that it's not just because things are hard, which will stop people from engaging with a particular activity. All right. There's obviously something else that's really driving them to, be spending all this time playing games. And it really comes back to this motivational science about being purpose-driven, feedback-rich, and learning intense. Now, Drop-In is a platform which is very new. So in terms of a learning intense experience, people can really learn a lot through engaging with this platform. It's a new technology, there are some components of it which are incredibly simple, other components which are a little bit more challenging. But as you keep learning things, if you can give people a good feedback as to them doing the right things, and really make sure that the purpose of why people are using drop-in is very clear, we can really tap into some of the best elements of motivational science to help people use drop-in. Okay? Really interested to have any further conversations with people on this if you think it's interesting for your network group or drop-in in general, or if you want to challenge it, let me know. We can go for a coffee and have a chat about it. But I'll move on. I digress nonetheless. With this particular point in mind, we kind of get to the next point, which is that activity drives more activity. So this is why when people first set up a group or a network group on Drop-In, a space on Drop-In for their network group, and they say, oh, well, I just want to set it up, put the basic structure there, and then we'll get the rest of the network group to start adding information and start adding content. This more often than not does fail, because of the point that activity drives more activity. If people go on to a site and when the first thing they see is that there's nothing there and no one's doing anything, they're not going to be very motivated to then, put more information there. So the more information you can start with and prompts you can give people to what information you can put onto the system, the more likely people will, put more things on. So then this brings us to the next point, that showing progress is more effective than highlighting the problems. All right. So if you can show that the progress people are getting by adding lots of content and how big your resources library is getting, or how many events the calendar now has on, showing the progress of people using the system, more people will be likely to go, the people who didn't necessarily engage at that point will be more likely to. That's much more effective than going to the network group and saying, you know what? Not everyone put their events up onto, Drop-In, and not everyone put a resource in the resource library. Typically not going to create the desired behavior response. Okay? I will move forward just because we are running short on time. But I see a question. We're having trouble getting people to take the first step and join the NOMUC page. We feel once they join, they will engage. How do I get them to sign up? That's a really good question. There's no direct, straight answer for that, but there are a few things you could try. I think I would go back to that first point around the first few points around the tangible benefits and whether or not it's clear. All right. I think also you could probably talk about the necessity and just talk about that from a time perspective. I know that within network groups, the biggest challenge is that people do not have time, and that it takes a lot of time also to coordinate network groups. But if we all kind of chip in, we can make that process a lot easier by using something like Drop-In. So I would pick one thing to start with, because I know that with many of the spaces, there's lots of different things that you can do on the spaces. Maybe start with something simple, like that that people are going to need, like terms of reference templates, like templates for meeting minutes, or maybe it could be calendars, whatever it may be for you, and task people with the challenge to do that. Another thing would be if you look at something that people have to do all the time, like meeting minutes. Don't distribute your meeting minutes via email. Distribute them on Drop-In. People need to read the meeting minutes and often refer to them. And if the only way for them to access is on Drop-in, you're going to have to get a login, all right? And you can rest assured that if that's something that people need to do and people are having trouble logging in, they can call me up and I will more than happy to help them get set up. And I guarantee there won't be any huge issues that we couldn't solve. I'm quite confident. So that's a few ideas. But hopefully through the rest of this session, you might be able to find some other things you might find interesting to do. Does that kind of answer your question? Okay, no worries. Well, definitely if you want to give me a call, maybe later on and we can go into a little bit more detail and you can explain how that went down and maybe we can strategize about something else that you could potentially do a little differently. I'm more than happy to kind of walk through that with you. I'll move on to the next one. Hopefully that will give you some more inspiration. This one is a really important one. It's around barriers. Are there barriers which are stopping my network group from using the system? I would say probably there is. Possible barriers that we've identified so far. First one, probably the biggest one, is the technical knowledge of how to use the system. And I would actually extend that by saying the technical knowledge of how to use different IT technologies, information communication technologies in general. All right, this seems to be a really huge one. Knowledge of what to use the system for. I think people are becoming a little bit clearer on this one. But again, I think there does need to be more communication about the tangible actions that people can take. Lack of confidence that the system will deliver what it's supposed to. That's a big one. And it's a big challenge for us. And one thing that I really want to do is work on a lot more marketing than we have been to really, show people that it can deliver on what it's supposed to. The next one is the lack of confidence in one's ability to do IT-related things. I see this as a big one. Often I do speak to people and they just say, oh, I don't do IT. So that can be a really big challenge when you're trying to get people to use an IT platform. And often what they need is a lot of, in my experience, what they need is a lot of encouragement and patience. And they do probably need a more handheld approach to some sort of training. So we do have training available and definitely happy to provide more tailored trainings to different groups via webinar or something like that. So if you can get everyone together, we can do a little bit more training with them as well. I think it will help. This is one that's a little bit interesting. Mismatch between expectations and the scope of the system. So sometimes what we might think is an obvious thing that we've communicated about what the system can do, we say it can do X, Y, Z, may translate to different things in other people's minds. And if they go on and what they expect the system to do, it doesn't quite match that, they're going to have a negative experience and then it's going to be a little bit harder for them to engage. So that's something to also be aware of. And this follows into the next point about negative experiences using technology in general. I'm not even saying specific to Drop-in. There's been a lot of, I used to work for an IT consultancy and I can tell you that the scarred lives, people's negative experience with using really bad systems has scarred them for life. And they're very reluctant to engage with technologies because they just think it's going to be a huge headache. All right, and so that's something that we have to be aware of as well. And another point could be that there are too many steps in place to reach success. So they have to do this, they have to do that, they have to do another thing before they can get to what they really want. And that comes back to how we can reduce the number of steps taken for people to achieve success. We discussed a lot in more detail in the last session. And the final one is fear of breaking the system and doing something wrong. Surprisingly, a very big one. People are very reluctant, very adverse to any sort of failure. So if people get onto some sort of a system and they don't feel that IT is their forte, they're immediately going to assume that they're going to do something wrong, and people hate doing the wrong thing. And this is a culture that I think is, not unique to this sector, to this to any other industry. I think it's a people thing, and I definitely learned a lot about this when I spent a lot of time teaching, specifically in Brazil. and I have done some teaching here. People are very scared of doing the wrong things. They do need a lot more encouragement and I guess confidence. There is no possible way for them to break the system, and if they have an issue, they can call us and we'll help them. Okay? So if you can see any point here that might be relevant to your group or all of them, then sitting down and working out how we can address each one of them or some of the key ones would be really important. Some of them are a little easier to deal with than others. So if it's a technical knowledge problem, call us up. We'll make a customized training. It will be via webinar, but you can put that up on the screen in your meeting room and I can walk through a bunch of things. Or maybe I can just do with a small group over the phone. Whatever you need, we can definitely do that. If it's about confidence, all they need is encouragement. All right, that's a very simple thing that we can do. And yeah, happy to talk through any ideas you might have to address some of these points with you in your specific network group. All right, moving quickly forward because I've gone already over time that I think, so we've only got about 10 minutes left. Final one, how can I make my space more relevant to my network group? This is a really interesting one and really quite important. The first point for this is thinking about feedback, all right? Now, sometimes not sometimes. I don't think anyone likes receiving feedback, especially if it's negative, all right? And that's just human nature, but specifically with a system, negative feedback and positive feedback, but negative feedback is really important. In fact, any type of feedback is really important. And why I say this is because having worked in the space of IT consultancy for a little while, I'm very, very confident that it's not possible for you to create an ideal system the first time. I don't believe it's possible for you to create a system which is inherently intuitive, which is entirely 100% relevant to every single user the first time. All right, no system with even that I've seen so far has achieved that. And if you look at some of the applications that you know and love, let's say you're a big fan of Microsoft Word. I'm not sure that many people are, but let's say that you are. Microsoft Word has constantly been evolving and changing and adapting. How has it been changing and adapting? It's been changing and adapting based on feedback. If you take something like LinkedIn or Facebook, which people are probably a little bit more favorable to, the same thing has happened. And these people have, these particular companies have teams of people dedicated to, looking at how they can improve things or improve the system for their clients. Now, obviously, as champions, you don't have the capacity to do all that, but getting feedback from your group is really important and making people feel comfortable that any negative feedback or any positive feedback that they have is really valuable. If you can create that environment where getting feedback is a comfortable experience for people, and then make people feel that once you've gotten that feedback that you can address it, I think really helps. And you definitely can address their feedback when it comes to the system, but all you need to do is give us a call and we'll see what we can do if you can't solve the problem yourself. All right, and we really thrive on this feedback here at with the drop-in team, because if we don't know what's going on for your users and we don't know what things are causing issues for them, then we can't fix it. All right, so this helps us help you essentially. And also then keeping in mind that progress is the goal, not perfection. So when you're having this idea that it's not possible for you to create things 100% perfect the first time, and that you're going to need feedback and to be constantly refining and changing, updating things, you start to get this idea that it's about progress. One person starts using drop-in other than yourself the first time, fabulous, it's progress. Then a couple more, then a couple more. Okay, they use things in the wrong way. They add, pages in the wrong place the first few times. That's okay. We're getting progress. It's not about being perfect, right? So it will take a little bit of work. The third point is that the needs of your network would change, okay? The system won't change with you automatically, all right? So as a champion, and I would encourage you guys to have more than one champion for your network group for drop-in, is to be constantly looking at what your network needs and how you can adapt the system to change with your network group, all right? So if for the first part of you using drop-in, it's really important for you to be just focusing on getting all the events in sync, make the calendar the first thing people see. In fact, the only thing people see when they go into the homepage. All right. Once you've got that sorted and people are comfortable with the calendar, you can change it. You can put the next thing that you need. Maybe it's a library of resources. Make that the next thing that you focus your efforts on. All right. Make that front and center. And change things with your space as your network changes. As people become more confident with drop-in, you can start adapting it to be using more advanced features. All right. So change things as they need to change for your system, for your group, because the system won't change automatically. The fourth point, I think this is really important, is that you and the rest of the champions in your network group have the power to customize your space. The only limit is your creativity. One thing I'd like to start doing a lot more is marketing to the champions and also to the wider drop-in community just how much you can do with drop-in. And I'm going to release very soon the drop-in strategic plan. And the reason I'm going to release that soon is because I want people to see how much of this can be used as a planning tool. And when you're thinking about the fact that within your network groups, you have people from multiple different agencies, planning can be really difficult when you only meet 4 times a year, and you consider there's some amazing tools online. Maybe this could be interesting for your group, all right? But again, this only came from having an understanding of all the different macros and all the different things available, and hopefully you're going to like what I show you guys soon. The next point is learning something new is hard, but the rewards for sticking with it cannot be measured. All right. So this is something that I think a message that I would be sending a lot to your network groups. But this is not going to be, the first time that people use it. They are going to need to invest a bit of time in the beginning, just like when they first used email. I think that's a really good one to mention. When people first started using email, it wasn't easy. And in fact, when it's interesting when you look at the history of how email developed. When it first started, people thought, oh, this is never going to stay. This is never going to be around for very much longer, because it was reliant on everyone having an email account. And what if I don't have an email account? How are you going to send the person an email? All right. And so people were very skeptical of whether or not email would even take off. All right. And look at it now. It is like the bread and butter for communication. All right. And yes, this took some time. And it took some learning as well, because the first email systems, and even email today sometimes, is a little bit difficult to kind of get your head around. But people invested time because they could see a value, they could see a reward. They, had information about how, training on how to use it, and it was a necessary thing. All right. These types of communication tools like drop-in are becoming more and more necessary for the sector. So it's a full, change in culture that we're seeing as well. All right. So definitely be communicating that point to your network groups. All right. So just quickly looking at some good case practices, I would definitely recommend that you check out looking at a few things like an about section of the champion space, or an about section of just about any space if they have one. Make your about section really clear and easy to see, because it's going to make it clear what people should be using your space for. Definitely go back to the previous session we had about navigation design, and look at how you can be putting different action buttons and information boxes to automate activities and to guide users. Another one that we didn't get to talk a little bit much about was scheduled discussion forums. So some people have really liked this idea that, we're going to start getting people to have discussions on forums on drop-in. Really great idea, but I can definitely tell you that it's not an easy thing to facilitate, all right? The technology that we have through drop-in is amazing. It's definitely state-of-the-art. But having a discussion on a forum is not as easy as having a discussion in a conference call or having a discussion face-to-face. There's a lot of facilitation that's required to make that happen. And a good example of that is the Housing Hub. This is actually on a different system, not drop-in, but it uses the same software as drop-in. So the Shelter WA has a Housing Hub, platform, if you will. And they've done something really cool, where they schedule specific times for a forum discussion. They send out invitations, and they get a guest speaker to come and, prompt the conversation and provide the beginning inputs. And then they can kind of spark conversations online that way. Once those particular conversations have been started, it's a lot easier for them to be continued. All right. Some other good case practices we've seen other network groups. They upload their reports and meeting minutes to drop-ins before making it available in other mediums as an early bird privilege. That's something that people have been doing, and in fact, some people have actually completely stopped making it available in other places, and then that's obviously made a very valuable place for people to go to get information. That's a good one that you can do. Resource libraries. There's a really good resource library that you can check out on the emergency relief space, so the ER publications, and there's a link there. These slides are available on the Champions page, Champions space, sorry. So yeah, creating a resource library I think is a really, really good one, because people need to have like a one-stop shop of places they can go to get information, so that can be really valuable. Another one, you can also embed surveys on Drop-in. So we have a survey feature, or you can even embed surveys from SurveyMonkey. Okay, that's something that makes it a little bit more tangible for people to kind of engage with, and exciting because people know SurveyMonkey, they're more comfortable with it. So that's another thing that you can do as well, and you can have a look at the Waycost membership survey. This is obviously a closed survey for Waycost members, so please ask that you aren't looking at it and adding, completing the survey, but otherwise you can have a look at how it's set up. And then another one you'll be able to see is the task lists on the drop-in team. So one thing I find within network groups is we have a lot of cool discussion about things that we can do, but then we're trying to follow up on things that needed to be done between now and the next meeting, and there's no way for us to track tasks and planning in a centralized location, and you don't know if you might create these Excel spreadsheets with all the different tasks and who's responsible, but then you don't know who's got the latest, most up-to-date copy. You can actually do some really cool task lists, and you'll be able to see that through when we look at the drop-in plan that I'm going to send through to you guys, which I think is quite cool. Cool, so there's some good case practices I would encourage you to check out. By following some of these good case practices and some other groups, and changing the way we think about how we get people engaged, making it very specific, one thing at a time, one step at a time, we may have a bit more success in getting people engaged. Just checking if there's any more questions, because it doesn't come up automatically. No. So I'll move through to the summary, but if there's a question, feel free to type it in and I'll have a look. We're looking at a bit of a summary of today's content. So again, it's very theory-based in terms of giving you some ideas and some different things to think about how you might, look at engaging more your net user group. The key things to remember is that we need to think about what the tangible benefits for collaborating online, create a sense of necessity. Make sure it's clear to people what they can specifically do. So what actions? Go on to Drop-in and add the events of your organization. Go into Drop-in, vote on this specific thing. Go to Drop-in to access the meeting minutes. Go to Drop-in to put your agency information. Give it really clear step-by-step tangible things. Creating a sense of positive reinforcement. So that could be as simple as, if you have 20 people in your network group, adds 5 people, if 5 people, once the first 5 people have added their events onto Drop-in, email everyone out and say, good job, all right? We've got 5, who's next? So people can see their progress and see that they're actually using it in the right way. We've actually got a pretty exciting news that I'm hopefully going to be able to tell people about very soon, which is a way that you can email people through Drop-in as well. Or you could just put it onto your news blog if you have one as well. Reduce the barriers, this is a big one. Give me a call if you want to talk about ways that you can do that. I think training is important. We're looking at rolling out some more training and making these champions trainings or more advanced trainings on different features more available. I'm going to be promoting them a lot more within the sector, so you'll be able to see them on the Waycost training calendar very soon. And just making sure that you're constantly reviewing and getting feedback to see whether or not what you have on your space is actually relevant to what your users and your network group needs right now. Okay. So the final tips for today that I would get you to remember on is things that I've found particularly useful as well, because I also manage a few network groups, so not a few, 1 or 2 network groups on Drop-in. First tip I have is delegate responsibilities within the group. right? Sometimes that can be really, really useful in terms of getting people to do a little bit more, and that's not specific to drop-in. But maybe if you have a kind of a conversation with someone, and I think often I've had these conversations where someone says, oh, yeah, really need to get more involved with drop-in. I just haven't had much time. Ask them if they wouldn't mind helping you with a specific thing and make that like a specific task each week. Hey, you know what? I really need someone to upload the meeting minutes every single week. You could probably do it yourself, but by getting someone else to be responsible for it, people will start to see that it's not just you that uses drop-in, that other people are doing things as well. All right? And it's one less thing for you to worry about. And if you start thinking about different things that people can do and engaging people through conversations like that, you'll find that there'll be more people doing things that won't be centralized on you. The second thing is be clear on what engagement looks like on your space. It would be nice if everyone knew how to use the type of technology straight away and they would come in and be frolicking online, if you will. That doesn't always happen. I can tell you it does because I've definitely been privy to seeing what that looks like on different network groups. But these network groups potentially have been using drop-in for a little bit longer than your own. So really be clear on, I guess, really expectations about what engagement look like and understand that it's a process and it will grow, all right? Start small and it will grow. That's the next point. Be realistic in terms of your goals for engagement, all right? Start with something simple and then move on. And then the fourth one is reflect and embrace this as an ongoing learning opportunity. This is a very new type of technology and something that, as time moves forward, it's going to become more the norm for how people communicate across all different industries. So, keep that in mind, really embrace that and know that by doing what you're doing with this in terms of managing your network, it's a lot of really good experience, and also learning how to use a system like Drop-In is really good experience as well. Okay, so that's all. If there are any final questions, please feel free to ask. It could be relevant to this content or something else that you might have pressing and you'd like to kind of talk a little bit about. Excellent, excellent. Really like to keep this kind of conversation open. Definitely, I've had lots of interesting conversations with different champions, and I would like to create a more open environment for people to kind of, definitely challenge us on these points and see if we can make them even better. I am sure that you will, Erica. I'm sure that you will. It will take a little bit of time. This is a culture shift, but we've got a team dedicated behind us in terms of kind of help that. And one thing that we haven't done with the drop-in team very much is doing a lot of marketing, and that's been a resourcing issue, and to kind of promote to people what the people can be doing on drop-in and help with that culture shift. But we will be having some new resources start very, very soon, which I'm very excited about. So we'll have more people to be able to help champions like yourself and the rest of users get more on board. So it's a journey. It's a journey. Is there anything else I can help you with, Erica, before we finish up today? I know you've sent us and sent a couple of emails, so I'll definitely get onto them today. I apologise for the delay. All right, fabulous. I will stop this recording now.